It's a rare treat for me to be here. I really am so appreciative that Jan, this woman, loves the Press Democrat, and we love people who love the Press Democrat. It's a treat for me to be here with Kent Porter. We've worked together for 30-some years, and I believe there's really no doubt that the Press Democrat would not have won the Pulitzer Prize in 2018 for coverage of the 2017 storms were it not for this man. I do have one regret with Kent. Sometimes when he would go off to charge into the throat of a firestorm or to go shoot tornadoes, he would invite me to come along and ride with him, and it was the strangest thing. Every time that happened, I had just had my hair done. As I think, maybe next fire season.
Still this year.
Well, and I just had my hair done. You know, after, I think there's some retired people in this room, and I believe you've probably all been asked what was your favorite whatever? If you were a police officer, what was your favorite case? And I do get asked sometimes, I'm sure Kim gets, what was your favorite story? I know Gila Barron, sometimes the people would ask her, what's your favorite story? And that sort of seemed like, to me, it'd be like, we did a lot of stories, and it'd be like asking a dentist, well, what was your favorite tooth? or Jan, magnificent career, and after all those years, tell us about your favorite asset transfer. So anyway, people truly, on occasion, somebody would ask me, what was your favorite story? And I just kind of stand there, and I didn't know what to say, and then I decided that there had to be a better answer than, I'll have to get back to you. What was your favorite story? So I truly, this is true, I applied myself to deciding what was my favorite story in 42 years at the Press Democrat. Well, upon thinking about it, I decided I landed on three favorite stories of my career, and each of them involves the human heart. The first one originated at Pearl Harbor, December 7, 1941, and I happen to believe that it was one of the greatest love stories of World War II. And it happened right here in our backyard, where the people moved here. Not long into the attack, a mighty torpedo blast blew 24-year-old seaman Dean Darrow off the deck of the battleship West Virginia. He's now in the water. He was there only a few times when a Japanese fighter came in low and strafed the wounded and dying men in the water. Dean Darrow was pulled out of the water onto a skiff and taken to an overwhelmed base hospital, where they found a wound in his back, somewhere around the middle of his back. And they patched it up, and of course they checked to see if there was anything in that wound, and they did conduct an x-ray. They didn't find anything. They patched him up, and now the war was on. And his ship, the West Virginia, was on the bottom of the bay. So they placed him on a destroyer, and that destroyer was on its way to Midway. So this 24, he turned 25-year-old seaman would run to battle station. He was winded. He would faint. And his heart just didn't feel right. And of course, he was no complainer, but he did mention to superiors that he didn't feel right. And I believe they thought maybe it was a battle fatigue, which he would have been entitled to, given what he endured and what he saw at Pearl Harbor. But it got worse. And as I recall, one day he couldn't get out of his bunk for maybe 3 days. So all right, there is something wrong with this sailor. He was sent back to Pearl Harbor to the hospital ship Solace, and new x-rays were taken. And this time, they found something that they had missed the first time. The first time the x-rays, they were looking at something, they thought it was a shadow. They looked closer and they saw that Dean Darrow had a 7mm machine gun bullet in the wall of his heart. It had come into his back and had stopped and lodged just in the wall of his heart. So that's why he didn't feel 100%. So he was placed on a ship and he was brought to California. He was to Mare Island here near Vallejo at the Naval Hospital there. And I believe there were still, we're now talking March into April of 1942. So Dean Darrow walked around with that thing in his heart for 3 months. Now he's at this hospital, the Naval Hospital at Mare Island. And he's greeted there by a nurse. And she'd only been in the Navy weeks. And her name was Alice Beck. She was assigned to his care. And pretty soon, Dean Darrow was kind of sweet on this nurse. And he asked her nickname in the Navy was Miss Becky. Her name was Alice Beck. Miss Becky, if I come through this surgery, would you take liberty with me? And the nurse said, well, of course I will. And then she said, like you're going to come through this surgery. So he went into surgery April 17, 1942. It's coming on 5 months that he's had a bullet in the wall of his heart. There was an esteemed surgeon from Stanford, Emil Holman. He went in through the chest, reached around, put forceps on that slug and tried to pull it out, and the whole heart wanted to come. So he figured it was a vacuum. He placed a little tube thing right alongside the bullet, and that bullet pulled right out. So then when Dean Darrow came to, the surgeon has it, and he says, Sailor, if you don't mind, I'd like to hold on to this. And Dean Darrow said, I'm sorry, sir, I'm going to be keeping that bullet. Well, then, he had something to say to Miss Becky. I'm still here, and are we going to go on liberty? We are. They took a bus into San Francisco. They saw a movie, maybe had a hamburger, and then love followed. I do want to mention one thing I forgot to say is that when they pulled that bullet out, it was all scraped up, marred. And so what they concluded was that it had struck probably the West Virginia and it ricocheted, and that's why it's because the fighter plane is right there. And if that bullet had gone straight into his back, it would have gone right through him, and we would not be having this conversation. But it ricocheted and it slowed down and stopped at the wall of his heart. What are the chances of that? This was the first time, by the way, that a bullet was ever removed from a living heart. So these two fell in love. They left the Navy. They were married in Reno. They would have 4 children, 11 grandchildren, 14 great-grandchildren. They worked their lives, and then they retired to Lake County, and I met them in 1991. I did some stories about the 50th anniversary of Pearl Harbor in 1991, and I met these two. Dean Darrow died weeks later, but they had lived together for 50 years. Dean would often say, and the two of them were very active in the Pearl Harbor Survivors Association, and they would speak about this. And Dean would say there and in private to people, he'd say the best thing that he got out of the Navy was his nurse. And Alice, she loved to say that when the bullet was removed from Dean's heart, it left a cavity that she was able to fill with her love. To this day, Alice, a member in high standing of the greatest generation, still speaks in public. Last Memorial Day, I was with her and she addressed a crowd of 100 or so people in Rohnert Park about this very topic. And what she likes to do is she tells the story And then she reaches into her pocket or her purse and she produces that bullet. Alice and her daughter Becky are, this is where I thought I'd get choked up before. Alice and Becky are here with us tonight. Alice recently turned 105 years old. You gotta see that bullet.
Here, stand up and show it.
Story number two. Story number two began with the birth, September 8, 1987, in San Francisco, of Nicholas Green.
Oh, that's not it. Where's the book?
As a child in Bodega Bay, Nicholas was known as delightfully bright, endearing, and imaginative. He loved to play Robin Hood, and he was very good at it. He was 7 years old when his well-traveled and highly literate family took a trip to Italy. Late the night of September 29, 1994, the Greens were driving toward a hotel in the toe of Italy. Nicholas slept in the back seat of the rental car with his little sister Eleanor, who was 4. Their mother Maggie sat in front alongside their father and driver Reg. The car was one of only a few present at that late hour on Autostrada A2 between Salerno and Calabria. Then the unthinkable happened. A car drew up alongside. There were 2 men in that car. They wore masks, and one of them waved a pistol. It's not clear what they were saying, but obviously they were very angry, and they were trying to get Reg to pull over. He was not about to pull over and expose his family to whatever it is that these men had on their mind. I believe that it would be determined in time that these were a couple of thugs, a couple of would-be mafiosi, who thought that this car was carrying jewelry, was delivering jewelry to jewelry stores. They had the entirely wrong car. Reg accelerated, the other car accelerated, they're racing side by side, and then there was a shot, and the rear window shattered. That happened the second time. Reg finally outdistanced them. They fell back at last. The family was safe when they felt it was really safe to pull over. They pulled over, they opened the door, and the dome light showed that Eleanor was okay. They saw that 7-year-old Nicholas, his tongue was slightly out of his mouth. They knew something was wrong, and upon examination, they realized that their son from Bodega Bay had taken a bullet to the head. At a Sicilian hospital 2 days later, Maggie and Reg made the anguished but resolute decision to donate Nicholas's organs. Those organs went to 7 ailing Italians, most of them young people. Italy wept. You can imagine, Italy. They have a child killed in their country. And in this country, particularly in the South, organ donation was almost unheard of. It was just not done. This extraordinary gift touched hearts throughout the world. This became, I was proud to write the Press Democrat's first story, so it would have been one of the first stories in the world. Very proud. I talked to some friends and neighbors and teachers of the Greens in Bodega Bay. But that story went global. There was a made-for-TV movie starring Jamie Lee Curtis and Alan Bates. I heard just today that Jamie Lee Curtis said she was never prouder of a role that she played. That story went everywhere. And there came to be created what we call the Nicholas effect. Reg wrote 2 books about the Nicholas effect. And the effect of this was that people, everyday people, started talking about organ donation. For one reason or another, they didn't know it was a possibility, or they just didn't think it was something they'd want to do. People started talking, people started signing up. Soon in Italy, the unthinkable, well, not the unthinkable, something unparalleled happened, and organ donation rates tripled in Italy. The BBC reported just last year that in 1993, the year before Nicholas was killed, 6.2 people per million around the world, 6.2 people per million donated an organ in Italy. 6.2 per million. By 2006, that figure had reached 20 per million. The Nicholas effect. People talking, people learning, and finding that you can have an effect. All of us can have a dramatic, heroic effect if we donate an organ or make ourselves available to donate an organ. Today in Italy, more than 120 public places are named in honor of Nicholas Green. Parks, schools, streets, playgrounds, squares, bicycle paths. People from around the world are so fascinated that they come and they see Nicholas's grave in the town of Bodega. And then nearby in Bodega Bay, if you haven't seen it, I very much recommend. It's the Children's Bell Tower at the Bodega Bay Community Center, just off Highway 1. 140 bells hang from it, and these bells were donated by people from throughout Italy. It's a gorgeous thing, and it'll be there forever. In 2017, a widely read article written by Reg Green, who if I failed to mention, he's a esteemed journalist in Britain and then in the United States. He wrote a story headlined, "My son died in 1994, but his heart stopped beating just this year." Andrea Mongiardo was 15 and in desperate condition when he received Nicholas Green's heart. It sustained Andrea and allowed him to thrive for more than 22 years. This year, 2024, marks the 30th anniversary of our loss of Nicholas Green and of the birth of the Nicholas effect. Nicholas would have turned 37 years old this year. Reg and Maggie Green moved some years ago from Bodega Bay to Southern California. They gave birth to twins who are now in their 20s, doing very well. They and their Nicholas Green Foundation continue to dedicate themselves fully to sustaining and advancing the Nicholas effect. Every day they talk to people, every day around the world. We want to talk to them, ask them questions about organ donation or say something about Nicholas Green. They will tell you, the Greens will tell you how proud it makes them to know that this day, thousands of people around the world are alive and thriving because they received donation, they received transplants of organs that were inspired to some degree by Nicholas Green and by the gift that his parents made. Maggie and Reg Green have joined us here tonight. Thank you. Then there's the good-hearted Jim Keegan and his friends from Santa Cruz County that he credits with saving his life and extending his life. The Keegan name, as you all know, has been deeply respected hereabout for generations and for good cause. Jim Keegan is a local business and community leader whose heart started going south on him quite a few years ago. He needed a transplant. He was on the list, and we all know that a lot of people are on these lists, on the transplant list, and they never get the call. One day he did get the call, and it was just after New Year's Day of 2015. A heart had become available. Jim and his wife Diane would learn at some point that it was the heart of a young man who died accidentally somewhere in California. Surgeons at UCSF placed that heart in Jim's chest on January 5, 2015, coming up on 10 years. I was fortunate to be there 2 months later, excuse me, on March 5th, when dozens of friends and neighbors of the deeply beloved Keegans lined their street in Santa Rosa, excuse me, to welcome Jim home. It was a golden moment. 1 year later, he'd had the heart for 1 year. They learned that someone wanted to meet him, wanted to meet them. It was Linda Meyer of Santa Cruz County. Linda wished to cast her eyes on Jim Keegan. And that's because the heart that saved Jim Keegan's life came from Linda Meyer's son. His name was Taylor. He was 19 years old when he died of an accidental gunshot wound. So they asked if they could come up. And of course the Keegans welcomed them up. So one glorious and epic day, Linda Meyer drove up here with her mother and her son and her daughter, and they walked into Jim's house, and the mother of Taylor Meyer placed her hand on Jim's chest and felt her son's heart beating inside this wonderful man. And she told Jim how pleased she was and how gratified she was that her son could live on through the life of Jim Keegan. That same day, Linda listened to her son's heart with a stethoscope, and a friendship was born. Linda Meyer said at the time, "This is the first time in a year that I am finally feeling at peace and feeling healed to meet this wonderful man." For the first time in a year since she lost her son, she's feeling a sense of healing. They became very good friends. For Valentine's Day last year, Jim Keegan gave Linda a very sweet gift. It was not candy. It was a teddy bear embedded with a replayable recording of the beating of Jim's and Taylor's heart. So this mom has this teddy bear and can hear her son's heart. Jim and Diane Keegan are wonderful people, and we're so happy that they too have joined us today. So there you have it. There was a time when I truly could not think of what my favorite story was. Now, if I'm asked, and I haven't been asked for a while, but if I am asked, what was your favorite story from your career at the Press Democrat, I get to choose among three. I'd like to now pass the baton to my friend, Press Democrat photographer supreme, Kent Porter. Are you ready? I will go through the pictures.
Can everybody hear me okay?